For more on this, let's turn to Heritage Foundation President Kevin Roberts. Kevin, great as always to have you with us, sir.
Man, it's a pleasure, Vince. I just wish to be unburdened by what has been with the vice president's rhetoric. Lord have mercy, that's awful.
I really just have no idea what she believes, and I love that the line she's repeating here in this answer is, "My values have not changed. My values have not changed. My values have not changed." I'm not even sure what that means, but I can definitely tell you that her policies are all over the place, aren't they?
Well, they are, and I would just say I actually take her at her word. Her values have not changed because she doesn't have any.
Yeah.
I don't like saying that about another human, but it's true. She's untethered to anything related to truth, or, I mean, maybe she's somewhat tethered to kind of Marxist ideology, but even that, it's just sort of objectively hard to tell. But she is all over the place, and I think the reason she's all over the place is because of the policy disaster that has been the Biden-Harris regime.
Sure, and we are in the closing weeks of an election. She's the brand new nominee, and she's trying to figure this out as she goes along. How do I convince people to like me? And suddenly she's starting to sound, in a lot of respects, like her opponent. She says she's for a wall now. She says she's for no tax on tips. Have you ever seen a political candidate this rapidly change their position so dramatically?
I have never seen anything like this. I mean, this whole campaign has been unique, right? But I've never seen two aspects of the Harris campaign thus far. The first is this fantasy land creation, this transformation that her accomplices in the media have created. Remember, just 4 or 5 months ago, we were talking about whether she would remain on the Biden ticket this year. But the second thing is this flip-flopping, and whether it is energy, whether it's the economy, whether it's national security and foreign policy, if you're the average voter, you don't know where she stands. And I actually think that's not going to change. I think she's going to continue to try to smile and cackle her way through this campaign. And what worries me a little bit is that unless people in the media, yourself accepted, obviously, actually ask the hard follow-up questions about what your policy positions really are and how they affect the American dream, she might just get away with it.
Right. So she says she's for fracking now. She's once again for the internal combustion engine. She's for building a wall. She's no tax on tips. You can share with us here exclusively. It's okay. Has she reached out to the Heritage Foundation for any other policy advice?
No, she hasn't. But, although she probably wouldn't admit it, honest to God, we have sent her and President Biden a copy of Mandate for Leadership. We do that for every major candidate. We offered a policy briefing. They've not taken us up on that, but maybe, just maybe, if she keeps sounding like the Heritage Foundation, she might want to give me a call.
You should crack that open and start checking it off like a bingo card. Okay, well, she's doing this one now. It seems with each passing day, it really is amazing. But what it gets to at its core, and I think you've indicated this in a number of ways, is her integrity. She'll say literally anything. That she lacks a true north here. And as you pointed out, when she says that my values have not changed, I completely agree with you. This is not a woman who you think of as having values. This is a woman who is desperately clawing at power and doing whatever she can, saying whatever she has to get there.
Well, that's right. And I guess if there's one consistent point of or aspect of her values, it's that power is good for her and her elite friends. Power is good for the radical left, especially if it's concentrated in Washington, D.C. And this is why over the last few weeks, as we at Heritage have been trying to figure out what can we do to from a policy ideas point of view, help the American voters, give them some resources as they're contemplating their decision.
Yeah.
We came up with this wonderful website, dangerouslyliberal.com, because that gives people the actual evidence, the actual substance of what Harris has done in her performance as vice president.
dangerouslyliberal.com, and people go there and they can find out more about what actually occurred. I've been talking over the last 2 days in particular about the fact that it was as late as December, the lefty media was crowing about the fact that Kamala Harris is responsible for more tie-breaking votes than any vice president in American history. Any. And if you actually look at what she's voted on and then you look at the state of our country, you start to realize those two things are very much connected, aren't they, Kevin Roberts?
Oh, my gosh, they're completely connected. If you think about what a lot of sort of unaffiliated centrist voters were thinking when they voted for Biden-Harris in 2020, I'm just talking about this from a policy point of view, they expected a more moderately liberal form of governance. What they got was very surprising to them in how radical it was on the misnomer of the Inflation Reduction Act, on the misnomer of the Green New Deal, both of which, of course, undermine the American dream and prosperity. Harris has been a vital part of that, not just in the obvious ways of being the vice president, but also, as you point out, Vince, in casting those tie-breaking votes. And that actually, I can tell you from the inside here, as I sit in my office and can almost hit the Capitol with a rock, for those of us who are fighting against those pieces of legislation on policy grounds, the recognition that she was going to cast that vote the wrong way, from my perspective, absolutely led to some of the worst, most damaging policies in modern American history.
Yeah. And we're living through them now, which is a disaster. So this Kamala Harris campaign it continues to barrel forward, and again, she's really not answering very many questions. I guess, you're an historian too. When in American history, this seems like it's pretty unprecedented. I know, I think it was William McKinley at one point campaigned from his porch. I think that was about. It was kind of a lazy campaign strategy. If you wanted to hear him, you had to go to him. But for the most part, this is pretty unprecedented, isn't it?
No, it is. It's I never thought we would see anything worse than Biden's basement campaign in 2020. But even Biden in 2020 was much more available to the press. And, since you gave me permission to speak as a historian, I will. You're absolutely right about William McKinley. But at least in the case of McKinley in the 1896 and 1900 campaigns, he was on his porch. You could walk up to his porch and ask him questions, and he would answer your questions substantively about his policy positions.
Right. Yeah. As opposed to Joe Biden is protected by Secret Service on the beach right now, doing nothing but staring at the waves. And Kamala Harris does what already sounds like, it's quite unfortunate because I was hoping for better, a mediocre CNN interview. But we'll see what happens.
I don't know why you and Hugh Hewitt, both of you friends and great commentators, had high hopes for Dana Bash to actually perform a great interview. I don't mean that personally towards her, obviously. I have no animus to another person, but just in terms of her pattern, she's grossly anti-Trump. She's grossly unfair. Now, we've only seen this one clip, but based on these 2 minutes, I'm not sure the other 16 minutes are going to be much better.
No, it's because I'm eternally optimistic that something good might happen. It's like I'm always looking, I'm like, maybe. Because look, here, Dana Bash and Jake Tapper, I was talking about this earlier with Joe Concha. The two of them moderated the debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And the wonderful thing about that debate is they pulled themselves out of it. They just asked the questions and then they sat back and let the two men speak. It ended up being great, useful for the political conversation. That was the moment Donald Trump defeated Joe Biden because Joe Biden left the race in shame as a result of all of that. So I saw that and I said, well, her track record includes at least one good event.
It does. They actually, in that debate, and I happily concede that because I agree fully. In that debate, I think they did a really good job. I just, as it relates to actually sitting down and expecting Dana Bash to ask the vice president hard questions, I don't think that's going to happen. Look, if I may, I think, and I think you're the best at this. I really do mean that. Whatever someone thinks, someone listening to us talking, whatever someone thinks about the media bias, about some other aspect of this campaign, about the vice president not answering questions about policies and issues, for us at Heritage, it all boils down to one thing. Every single thing Vice President Kamala Harris has done, every single tie-breaking vote, every single stupid cackle has been something that has undermined the American dream and our prosperity. It actually is that simple. And if Trump and Vance can simply prosecute that case, even with the bias of the media, I think they will prevail. Yeah,
that's right. And the media posture that you're watching represents the fundamental contempt she has for the Republic. The idea is that if you're supposed to interface with the voters, you're supposed to answer the tough questions, you're supposed to read out what your policies are so we have a good sense of whether or not you deserve our vote. And the fact that she's trying to gloss over that in this very short campaign in which she was appointed to the role of nominee, it's just as clear a sign as ever that they're raising a vulgar gesture to the American voter.
It is, and it's utter contempt. And for left of center friends who might be listening, I would happily contrast what your description just now of the vice president versus President Clinton. I disagreed with Clinton, as I know you did, on most things, but the one thing I always respected about him was his genuine tendency to have an intellectually honest debate with someone. He was so confident in his positions and his reason that he had those policy positions, he would debate anyone, anytime.
Yeah.
We can disagree with the outcomes of those, but you can at least respect that just a generation ago, the standard bearer for the American left didn't have that kind of contempt that she personifies every day in office.
So Kamala Harris's positions include kneecapping American energy in the past, and the ones I truly believe she has, getting rid of fracking, opening up our borders, giving illegal foreign nationals all sorts of benefits, defunding the police. The list is endless and radical. But her running mate, Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, I'm struggling to figure out which one's more radical, because this is the guy who supports tampons in the boys' room. He's the one who established a snitch line during COVID so that neighbors could rat their other neighbors out to the Soviets in Minnesota about whether or not they were abiding by COVID rules. He deployed the National Guard to shoot people on their porch with paintball guns during the George Floyd riots. I'm just trying to figure out, in your view, as a policy guy, do you know who's more radical on this ticket?
Actually, purely from a policy point of view, I don't know, because the examples that you mentioned of Governor Walz, along with some other aspects of his administration, are just as bad. And in a lot of ways, if you think about the power that a state government has over you in your day-to-day life, it's a different kind of power, thankfully, than the federal government. During COVID, the worst governors, and he was certainly at the top of the list, really abused that power. During the George Floyd riots, he did. And so in terms of how an elected official can harm you in your day-to-day existence, we saw the worst of that during the COVID shutdowns. He actually was the worst. He was worse than Gretchen Whitmer. And so it really is hard to answer the question, is Tim Walz or Kamala Harris more dangerously liberal?
Yeah, well, I don't think CNN asked. I don't think that comes up tonight. Hey, which one of you's worse? I'm pretty sure that's not on the menu. Kevin Roberts from the Heritage Foundation, and the host, by the way, of the Kevin Roberts Show. Great podcast. Kevin, great to talk to you as always.